Pat Quinn, my mentor and guru. How are you, buddy?
I am doing well, thank you.
I'm good. I super appreciate you being here. I have had the great honor to work with you and be in your company and be under your tutelage a number of times, and I'm so excited I get to share you with all my people. So thanks for being here. It's great.
Well, I'm excited to share.
So, what would you describe yourself as? Would you call yourself a speaker coach?
Yeah, most people now probably know me as a presentation coach, but I didn't get my start as a presentation coach or even as a professional speaker. I actually got my start as a professional magician and worked magic professionally for 10 years. And after that, I decided I needed to get a real job. So I became a public school teacher. I taught high school math for 12 years. During that time, I picked up an advanced degree in how adults learn. And so I really bring two things to the table when I'm working with anybody who has a business or a nonprofit. The first is a little bit of stagecraft from my years of doing magic. And the second is a real understanding of how adults learn, how the audience is sitting in front of you, whether that's one person or 1,000 people. How are they listening, learning, and remembering everything that you're saying? I'm hyper focused on the audience, whether you're talking one-on-one to somebody or whether you're talking to a group of people, because the audience's response is what matters. We get so caught up in what we're saying. My first piece of advice for anybody who's speaking is to turn the camera around and stop filming yourself. Film the audience instead, because you'll learn more by watching the audience for 5 minutes than you'll learn by watching yourself for 45 minutes. You'll learn the best parts of your presentation and the worst parts of your presentation. You'll learn the most engaging parts of your presentation and the least engaging parts. And that's all because we focus on the audience instead of focusing on the speaker themselves. And we want to make sure that the audience is having the response that we want. So in the last 10 years, I've been pretty fortunate. I've worked with some of the greatest speakers in the world, from Daymond John and Sharks on Shark Tank to Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and people like that. But most of the people that I work with are not professional speakers.
Hmm.
Most of the people that I work with wouldn't even call themselves speakers. Most of the people that I work with are business owners, coaches, entrepreneurs who want to attract new clients, grow their business, and have a greater impact on the world. And I believe that having a perfect presentation, a talk that introduces you to new people, is the fastest, most effective way to do that.
Hmm. Well, I had the pleasure of sitting in on your, I think it was Milwaukee. Is that where we went? Yeah.
Oh,
So we,
all great speakers come to Milwaukee at one point, Shelley, and
yeah,
you are
yeah.
no exception to the rule. So,
Yeah. So
uh,
so that was it was so informative because there are small nuances that if it's kind of like Fight Club, right? Nobody talks about it, and if you know, you know. It's kind of like that. It's kind of the speaker version of that, right? And um there were so many tips and tricks, like when you watch a great speaker. So I first saw you at an event, and and you're obviously a powerful speaker and an engaging speaker, and you hold everybody's attention, but you did this thing at the very end where you circled back and gutted the audience. And it was kind of one of those things that nobody saw coming, but the next day everybody was still talking about. Can you believe that moment? It was the Charlie's Angel sticker on the alarm clock, I believe. And um and but but it made your lessons sticky and memorable. You were talking about adult learning, and when it comes to figuring out how to structure your talk, what do you recommend in terms of making your content sticky, so that, because here's the thing, you can deliver it and you can have the story and that's amazing, but you also need to remember that it needs to be received by the people in the manner that they can receive it.
yeah, it's a great question, Shelley. I think it all starts in the beginning with clarity. Clarity on the problem that you're solving for the audience today. A lot of people go into a presentation and they don't have a set purpose. And I think the saying is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. But if you have a set purpose on the problem that you came to solve today, a whole bunch of really good things happen. One, your nerves go away because you don't have to be the smartest person in the room anymore. Congratulations. Instead, all you have to do is have a solution to this one problem that you're here to solve today. The other thing that you need clarity on is you need clarity on what you want the audience to do next. I'm a specialist in high converting presentations. What does that mean? That means that my goal isn't to get the audience to laugh, although oftentimes the audience will laugh during the presentations that we write. My goal is not to get a standing ovation. There's a lot of people out there right now who are speaking and they're getting bad data from the audience. The audience is giving them a standing ovation. The audience is saying, I love everything that you do. I love it. But they're not taking the next step. They're not signing up for the program. They're not buying the product. They're not actually having life change. They're just being entertained for 45 minutes. But when you are really clear on, I'm here to solve this problem for the audience today, and for that to happen, I need the audience to do this next, whether that's sign up for my program, whether that's to, join my site, whether it's to sign up for my newsletter or just follow me on Facebook, whatever you want them to do next so that you can go deeper. Zig Ziglar said, I can change your life a little bit in 45 minutes, but it's not until you engage deeper in my programs. And for him, his cassettes and his tapes and his programs, that's when the real life change happens. And I want everybody who's watching this to have a real impact on the lives of others. And that requires the audience taking the next step. So you have to be really clear before you ever start writing a talk. What is the problem that I'm solving? And what do I want the audience to do next? Now, once you know that, then you can actually build things into your talk, just like you said. So the audience not only listens and pays attention for 45 minutes, but they're moved to take the next step right after that. And a lot of times when you don't have that purpose, you're doing it completely backwards. Let me give you an example. Your opening story that you share with a lot of people. You always start with this great story. A lot of people are telling the exact opposite story that they should be telling. A lot of people are using the opening story to separate themselves from the audience. So I'm the only person who's ever done this. I did this faster than anyone who has ever done this. I did this better than anyone. I grew this bigger, did this faster. I got cured from a disease. I'm the only person in the history of the world who's ever been cured from this disease. All of those stories separate you from the audience because the audience can't share that experience in common with you. Instead, you want your opening story to be probably your most ordinary story. Ordinary stories at the start of a presentation are always better than extraordinary stories because ordinary stories get the audience nodding their head saying, oh, that speaker has something in common with me. We have shared experiences. Daniel Pink's research shows that these shared experiences not only get the audience to pay attention, but also get the audience to take action and buy at the end of the presentation. So, I coach 3 different astronauts. I coach 6 different Olympic medalists. I coach a guy who's climbed to the top of Mount Everest, not the base camp, but the top. And when they tell those stories at the start of their presentation, how many people in the audience can say that same thing happened to me? None of them. But I coach another person, someone who tells a story early in their presentation about arguing with their spouse about whether the toilet paper should come out over the top of the roll or under the bottom of the roll.
Which we all know it's over the top.
Because anyway, we all know there's a right answer to that question. I won't say what it is. But when you tell that story, everybody in the audience is nodding their heads because they've had the experience of having the argument. It's a shared common experience. That speaker is miles ahead of the speaker who stood up and said, I've done this faster and better and stronger than anyone else in the world has ever done it. At the start of your presentation, your goal is to connect with the audience, not separate from the audience. Most people are doing it backwards because they haven't even thought about what they want the audience to do next or why they'd want to connect with their audience like that.
It's interesting. So as a podcast host, I get pitched all of the time. And what you said it reminded me of this. Like I get pitches all of the time and it's like me, I, separation. But the thing is you can't recover from that. Like you can't, once you lose somebody's attention, you're not getting them back. So to your point, that is an absolutely fatal mistake to make at the beginning of the presentation because whatever comes after that doesn't matter. You've lost your audience.
Exactly. And it's such a small thing, but most people are doing it backwards. Most people have thought, oh, the purpose up here is to wow them, or the purpose up here is to shock them with how good I am, or how another mistake a lot of people make at the start of their presentation is to share the most painful moment of their life. Like, I don't know who's out there coaching you to dig deep into the depths of your pain and share the most shocking, painful moment of your life with the audience in the first 2 minutes. But your opening story is a little bit like a first date. Like, you don't share everything. You kind of just look for things you haven't, like on a first date. I don't walk up and be like, hi, I'm Pat, I was in prison. Like, no, you save that for the second date or the third date. Like, you're going to be with these people for a while. Like, you don't have to blurt it all out in the first 3 minutes. At the beginning of your first date, you just look for things you have in common. Talk about parents. Most people have them. Talk about kids. Lots of people have them. Talk about whatever you share with the audience. If it's an audience of entrepreneurs, talk about starting a business. They've all done it. If it's an audience of teachers, talk about students. They all have them. Like, just look for areas of commonality and talk about those things. And you're going to be so much further ahead than the person who came out and shared the most painful moment of their life with the audience in the first 2 minutes. Because once again, to your point, Shelley, once you do that, the audience kind of jumps back and is like, oh, inappropriate sharing.
Yeah, whoa.
Hard to recover from that. Hard to recover from that.
Well, the irony is when you have somebody who's new-ish to speaking, call it, somebody who wants to share their message to either grow their business or to share, just whatever, to share their message, doesn't matter why. When they get up on stage, initially, I would say I don't know of anybody who's a brand new speaker who wasn't terrified. But the irony is what you're saying is it doesn't actually have to be that hard. Because when you get up there, you start sharing that opening story, that bonding story, that commonality, and building the bridge of connectivity and positivity between you and your audience. Something magical happens, which is, as a speaker, you get buy-in right away. And then so the nerves that you have and or had start to subside because, initially a big reason that a lot of people are terrified of speaking is like, well, what if I get rejected? What if nobody laughs? What if I forget my lines? And a lot of that is caused by nerves and a lot of that is caused by worry. But once you dissipate that by having that moment with the audience where the toilet paper roll, I mean, how simple is that? But everybody's got the moment and everybody's got an opinion. And then all of a sudden, they are with you and they want you to win. So it's an amazing way to set yourself up and to open it up for a series of reasons.
Yeah, the beauty of sharing commonalities with the audience is that they'll be cheering for you because it's not your story anymore. It's our story. Any speaker who gets up and thinks, I have to get up and tell my story is doing it wrong. What you should do is get up on stage and tell our story, all of it, the story that you share with the audience. So if I'm speaking to a group of speakers, I don't want to stand up and be like, I spoke at the largest event ever and I did great. Well, because very few people have spoken at that event.
And also you sound like a jerk.
Exactly. I'm separating myself from the audience. What I want to do is tell a different story about a time that I went up on stage and I was so nervous I forgot everything that I was going to say. Or about a time I went to speak at this event, there were 200 chairs in the ballroom and 5 people showed up at the event and they couldn't shrink the room or take out chairs. So I spoke to a ballroom with 200 chairs with 5 people in the room. I'm just glad I spoke before lunch because my buddy Ron was speaking after lunch and 3 of the people didn't come back. So there were only 2 people there after lunch. Why do I tell those stories? I tell those stories because the audience has them in common with me. Everybody who's tried to be a speaker has forgotten what they've said because they're nervous and showed up at an event that they said there would be 200 people at, and there weren't 200 people at the event. There were a lot of empty chairs at the event. Like, those are shared common experiences. Now I'm not telling my story. Now I'm telling all of our stories. And so you're naturally cheering for me because I'm telling your story along with mine. It's just like my story. And when you get that wrong, the other thing, the real help of clarity on the problem you solve, Shelley, is that you don't have, the nerves go away because you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I can't tell you how many people tell me they're nervous before they're going to speak because sometimes it's just this one person's going to be in the room and they're like my mentor. They're better at this than I am. And I'm like, wow, most of the time when I speak, half the room is better at this than I am. But my goal is not to be the smartest person in the room. I'm here to solve one problem. I help people get higher conversion rates from the stage. And I'm really good at it. I've helped some of the best people, best speakers in the world do this. I can help anybody do this. Once I take the burden off my shoulder of I have to be the smartest person in the room or I have to solve all of your problems, then the nerves kind of go away. Now all I have to do is talk about the thing that I love to do, the thing that I do every day, the thing that I'm really good at, the thing that I've helped hundreds of people just like you do this exact same thing. And that doesn't make me nervous at all. I do that every day. I talk about this every day. I only get nervous when I think I have to be smarter than everybody else or solve all their problems. And I don't have to do either of those things once I get clarity.
That's super powerful. You were talking about finding a solution and what is the thing that you want everybody in the room to do. So you have noticed a pattern or a need in your audience, and you have also created a solution. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, for years, I tried to gather my stories and keep track of my stories. Everybody who's going to use stories to sell, use stories to grow their business, use stories to impact the lives of other people should have a way to keep track of their stories, because funny things happen, little things happen, and we think, I should keep that, I should keep track of that. I should remember that because I could teach with that, or I could give that as part of my presentation. So for years, I jotted these down on cocktail napkins and Post-it notes like many people did. And I put them all in this one folder. I had this one giant folder. I always thought I was one good gust of wind away from losing all the stories of my life. And then somebody gave me a story journal. And this was amazing. It was this notebook, and I filled it with stories. I loved my story journal. The problem was it wasn't always with me. Sometimes I'd be in a restaurant and my story journal would be out in the car. Sometimes I'd be at work and my story journal would be at home. So I would jot down those stories on Post-it notes and napkins and jam them into the story journal. So when I got the story journal, it was like 1 inch thick. And then like a year later, it was like 5 inches thick because it had all these little pieces of paper and scraps of paper in it. And once again, I was one good gust of wind away from losing all of my stories. And I thought, well, why isn't there a way to keep track of all of your stories like in the cloud so they could never get lost and they'd always be with you? We have a place to store our photos. We have a place to store our music. Why isn't there a place to store our most valuable asset, which is the stories of our life? And I looked all over for one and I couldn't find one. So I created one. I created a tool called StoryLink.com, StoryLink.com. StoryLink is the one place online to store all of your stories. It's always with you because it's available on your phone, it's available on the computer, it's available everywhere. And it allows you to categorize your stories. These are great opening stories for a presentation. These are great teaching stories. These are great selling stories. These stories talk about what I believe. These are great conclusion or closing stories. Then, anytime you want to put together a presentation, whether you're asked to speak for 5 minutes or 45 minutes, you simply go to StoryLink.com. You go to your own bank of stories and say, I'm going to start my presentation with this story. Then I'm going to teach with these 3 stories. Then I'm going to finish with this story. You push one button and it prints out the script for your entire presentation. It takes the process of writing a presentation from days down to minutes. And the best part is there's video teaching from me right next to each type of story, teaching you how to tell the story in the way that will convert the highest and impact the lives of the most number of people. And so StoryLink.com, StoryLanq.com is the one place to store all of your stories. If you don't have a way to store your stories, you're letting some of your most valuable assets and treasures just blow away in the wind, Shelley, and I don't want anybody to have to do that.
Well, I will say I have been inside StoryLink.com, and it's valuable for more reasons than just that, because yes, you have a place to store your stories and you're like, here are your opening stories, here are your teaching stories, but it also explains, like, had we not had the privilege to be able to sit down and talk to you, most people wouldn't know which story to open with. But inside the software, it's like, here's what an opening story is, here's what it's for, here's why you use it. When you're scouring through the stories in your life, here are the things that you want to look for. And there's a number of videos in there that teach you different things. Can you talk about some of the other categories of videos that you have in there?
Absolutely. So we know that when people first start using StoryLink, there's this burst of activity of entering all your stories, like emptying out your head. And to help you do that, we kind of categorize them into these different types of stories. Like we just talked about the opening story, which you will have in common with your audience. There's teaching stories. So you have things that you've done that teach certain things, and those should go in the middle part of your presentation. A lot of times when I tell somebody not to use that extraordinary once in a lifetime story at the start of their presentation, they get all sad and they're like, oh, I wanted to tell that story. I feel like I should tell that story. And I always say, you can tell that story.
Just not at the
Just
beginning.
don't tell it in the first 2 minutes. It's a great story to teach a lesson. It probably teaches perseverance. It might teach, a specific technique. It might teach something related to your area of expertise. We'll probably use it in the middle of your presentation. And then you've got your closing stories, which are your most emotional stories, are used for the end of your presentation because you're trying to move the audience through a series of emotions that will get them to take action. And so a lot of times people have those as their teaching story. Sometimes they have them as their opening story. We just want you to move them to the end of the presentation. We call it the emotional close. And there's some specific characteristics of it that I teach inside the StoryLink website, but we teach you how to figure those out too. We also have your belief stories. Daniel Pink's research, I mentioned him twice now, but he knows, as I do, that people want to do business with people who believe in specific things. And so a great part of your presentation is when you stand up, look the audience right in the eye and say, I believe that you have a story that the world needs to hear, or I believe ordinary stories are better than extraordinary stories. Those are I believe statements, and the audience loves them. If you're giving a presentation 5 minutes or 5 days, I don't care how long it is, you should stand up, face the audience, and tell them what you believe, because it's going to move people to go on the next journey with you, move people to take the next step with you, and move people to come into your world where you can have the greatest impact on their life.
Well, one of the things that you talk about inside the website as well is, again, most people are not skilled speech writers, so we know what we need in the opening story. We know what we need in the teaching stories, but the thing that you that you teach inside of that is, oftentimes speakers will close with their sale. And they will get people to, it's like, hey, sign up for my thing or buy my other thing or whatever that looks like. And so the other thing you talk about inside StoryLink is that you want to be mindful of how you want them to leave feeling. You don't want them to necessarily leave feeling sold to, even though the thing that you have is going to be helpful and maybe they would like to and need to invest in and to come on board on the journey with you. But you talk also about how not to put your closing, not to put your sale right at the end. Can you talk about the difference of finishing with it, where some people might make the common mistake of thinking, well, I want it to be the last thing on their mind to sign up or to come on the journey or to run to the back of the room or whatever that looks like. What is the difference we can make if we just do that one simple tweak?
Well, there's two types of people in every audience. There are tactical decision makers and emotional decision makers. And what most people would consider the call to action in their presentation, the part where they ask the audience to take the next step, that could be to buy, could be to sign up. It could be as simple as download this free resource or click on this link in a webinar. That's a tactical call to action. You're tactically telling the audience what to do next. And we call that a tactical sale for a tactical decision maker. Most people finish their presentation with that. There's a lot of people out there training you to finish your presentation with that. And that is not paying attention to the audience in front of you. The audience in front of you is 50% tactical decision makers and 50% emotional decision makers. And if you finish your presentation with the tactical call to action, you're actually leaving 50% of your customers behind. You're leaving 50% of the money on the table. And you're only having half of the impact that you could be having on this world. Instead, what you want to do is follow your tactical call to action with an emotional close. And that starts with you asking yourself, what emotion do I want the audience to be having at the end of the presentation? Now, Shelley, most of the time when I watch a speaker, I can tell in about 3 minutes whether they're a tactical decision maker or an emotional decision maker, because most people sell the same way that they make decisions. If you're a tactical decision maker and you're selling, you're probably going to tell me all about the tactics. It's an online course. It has 8 lessons. Each lesson is 43 minutes long. The lessons are released at 2 o'clock on Monday afternoons. That's Eastern time, 1 o'clock Central time, 12 noon in the mountains, and 11 o'clock in the Pacific time zone. Like it's tactics. And the emotional decision makers are left high and dry. Now, I can also tell when you're an emotional decision maker, because an emotional decision maker will only try to sell through emotion. They'll stand up and they'll say, it'll feel good when you buy this. And the audience is like, I don't even really understand what it is. And the speaker's like, it doesn't matter. You should just do it. It will feel so good. It's actually the speaker who can do both. The person who can tactically tell me what it is and then emotionally tell me how I will feel, who is going to get the most impact and going to have the most revenue and the most sales. And by the way, if you sell anything to couples or to business partners, you should know that most successful business partnerships and most married couples are one tactical decision maker paired with one emotional decision maker, and either one of them can veto the sale. So you've got to get good at both of these. Now, you want to do the tactical call to action first because it activates the buyer for longer. You want to do the emotional call to action second because it doesn't last as long. And then at the end of your presentation, both types of buyers are activated or decision makers are activated, and the maximum number of people will take the next step with you. So these are the sorts of things that we help you with inside of storylink.com, so that it takes the process of putting together a presentation, whether you're doing a 5-minute Facebook Live, trying to get people to sign up for a free training, whether you're on a podcast, trying to get people to take a free download, or whether you are giving a presentation on a big stage in front of a big audience, asking them to buy a big product. Every one of those has a call to action that you want to get the maximum number of people to say yes to and actually take that action. And everything that we show you and teach you helps you do that.
Well, you have worked with and trained, obviously, some of the best in the business, but you've also worked with and trained people who are starting out. What becomes possible for people when they follow this structure that you've created in StoryLink? Because I know many people, not only are they not speakers, there's somebody who has a gift that they want to give or a product they want to sell via a message or gift or whatever it is they do, but they're not messengers per se, and they are certainly not speechwriters. So for those people, what has been your favorite testimonial or your case study of somebody who has started out wanting to share their gifts and their message with the world, not having any clue how to do it, and then working with you using the software and being able to share the gift that they want to give and to build the business and have the freedom? What is the ripple effect of that for those people, and what is your favorite example of that?
Yeah, there's really 2 effects, Shelley. The first is just getting up on stage, having the confidence to get up on stage and speak to people. And the person who gets up on stage instantly has credibility, has an audience, and has a voice. I think of Roger, who's a plumber, and in the city that Roger's in, there's thousands of plumbers. You open up, you look up plumbers, you Google plumbers in the city, you'll see thousands of plumbers. They all look the same. They're like, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me. And then Roger steps up on stage and says, let me just show you how to fix a toilet. Roger has a YouTube channel where his videos get over 100,000 views when he shows people how to change their own water heater. Or his most popular video, how to pick a plumber when you need a plumber. And when Roger stands up and teaches, whether it's how to fix your toilet, how to change your water heater, or how to pick a plumber, you know who everybody wants to work with? Everybody wants to work with Roger, because he's not one of 1,000 people saying, pick me, just standing up on the stage and saying, I'm going to teach you. Gets him credibility, gets him customers, gets him a voice in the industry. And he's an industry leader now. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that happens is you switch your model from selling one-to-one to selling one-to-many. I think of Jonathan, who does presentations at schools, churches, and healthcare facilities. And his old model used to be he would drive to a school, a church, or a healthcare facility and talk to someone, selling one-to-one. Then he'd have to talk to another person, or he'd have a sales call, and then another sales call, and another sales call. But now, using the presentation that he wrote at storylink.com, Jonathan can stand up in front of a group of 1,000 principals and say, this is the presentation that I give. Do you want it at your school? And instead of one person signing up that day, 50 people will sign up that day. He can, instead of calling one healthcare facility, he can stand up and speak in front of a group of 200 healthcare administrators. And instead of one presentation being booked that day, he can book 30 or 40 of his contracts that day. When you switch the model from one to many, your business just scales differently. Your impact just grows exponentially, and your revenue. It is the most cost-effective, risk-free way to grow your business. There's a lot of people out there telling you to buy Facebook ads or invest money in this, invest money in this, invest money in this. Standing up and speaking on stage or online is the only customer acquisition model that I know that not only is free, if you do it well, you might even get paid for it. There's a lot of days where I get paid $1,000 to speak and I acquire customers. I'm getting paid for customer acquisition as compared to most people who are paying per customer. And at the very minimum, you'll get it for free because you'll be the speaker in the room. You'll have credibility, you'll have impact, you'll have an audience, and you'll have customers every single time.
Well, and it also creates what I call the cycle of influence. The more opportunities you get, the more opportunities you are offered to you, and it gets bigger every time. So you start out, you give a talk, you share your message, and then somebody hears you, somebody sees you, and they're like, oh, they delivered that really well. That was impactful. That was valuable. I'm going to have them on. And then all of a sudden, your outreach sounds like as seen on. And your stages get bigger, virtual or literal stages get bigger and bigger, and your circle of influence increases as well. So I am so grateful that you built this software. It's helping a lot of people to be able to really just share their gifts in a way that that articulates to the audience who they are, how they serve, and why it matters. So thanks,
and here's
Pat.
the best news. You can try it for 14 days, absolutely free, and see if it's a good fit for you. Enter your stories, put together a presentation, watch the training videos, and see if it's a good fit for you. If it's not a fit for you, in 14 days, you can cancel, not get charged anything. If you want to keep using it, you can keep using it. All available at Storylink, STORYLINQ.com, storylink.com. It's the one thing standing between you and everything we just talked about, Shelley. Having that influence, being that voice, getting those customers, having that impact is having your stories put together in a way that moves other people to take action. And storylink.com helps you do that.
Well, especially if you get a last minute opportunity, you can just go, okay, I'm choosing this, spit out my speech, boom, let's go. And the beauty of that, lastly, is they're your stories, right? Like, it's not like you have to memorize somebody. You were there. You were the only person who knows if you're telling it correctly. As long as you get the order right, it's just so slick. And I'm excited by all of it. So thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing all of this information. It's going to make a huge difference to so many people, and we appreciate you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Everybody get out there and tell your stories.